Well, hello there. Still not well, but still getting gradually better. But I'm sorry for the croak. So this is following on from John Painter's project number 15, of which I've spoken about actually quite a bit, but haven't necessarily credited him all the time. But it's project number 15 called How Time Goes By Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And it's from his excellent book called Sound and Structure, published by Cambridge University Press in the 1990s. He talks about assignment 2 and says, for each of the following tunes, notating all the points of recession and progression and the interplay between them, how do these factors sustain each tune through to its end? And the first one is As Time Goes By, second one is Summertime, third one is Over the Rainbow, and the last one is a folk tune called Sweet William. So I'm actually going to go straight into Summertime because it's a really interesting one here. So I'm just going to sort of like leave a few bars and sort of see what he says about it. So the first thing to do is just go like that. I'm not really making much attempt to be wholly accurate. So it starts on here. Let's try and put that all on one line if we can, just so it's a bit easier. There we go. Almost one line. Let's just make it a little bit smaller. There we go. So, he says, Summertime from Gershwin's Porgy and Bess. Unlike As Time Goes By, which makes its progress towards the climax very gradually, or Somewhere Over the Rainbow, with its strong upward octave leap moderated by the slow-moving minims, Gershwin's famous song, For All That It Is a lullaby, opens with a tension born of nostalgia. In addition, the melody's range or tessitura literally heightens the emotion, so much so that the recessive controls, in other words the falling intervals, must work all the harder, as it were, to maintain the balance and prevent the tune from bursting at the seams. The seams, he says, are internal cadences, and says in any melody need careful handling because it is from these points that the impetus must drive the tune on. So he also says the sculptor Austin Wright, I don't know the sculptor Austin Wright, speaks of the need to identify the points at which things legitimately stick together. They should show because they're the strength of the structure. Similarly, in music, we should be aware of the points from which the structure progresses to carry the ideas further. Also, compare with, in architecture, the piers of a bridge and the pillars of a cathedral nave. It's a really interesting point. So here, he starts off with, and what he does is he identifies recession and progression movement. So the first thing is that it sort of goes down like that, but at the same time, it's kind of maintained as well. Then overall, it goes down from a D down to an E, and the little recession devices here and here. But then we have some progressive devices with the octave leap, but of course a little bit of a rest as well. Also notice that this is the head, that idea as well. So we get another little bit of sort of maintenance rather, all the way through. And then little bits of recession as well. So it's really interesting, isn't it? Because it's quite recessionary in many, many ways, but because it's high and starts from quite a high point. Obviously, the rhythms are less important with this in terms of the exact rhythm. You know, it wouldn't be performed like that. Jazz is sometimes you can't really sort of notate it in classical ways, but so, you know, quite free. But the shape is interesting. And it really is this balance here that's quite recessionary. But these little points here, it is that sort of swung idea, lilting quality, I think actually could be quite progressive in many ways. So I'm going to give it a little bit of progression there. And also a small amount here as well, even though it's actually lower than this. And this is the problem of trying to compose to formula. It doesn't really work. And melodies aren't really composed to formula. You can try and use a technique, and it's good to start off with maybe as a beginner, as a complete beginner, when you haven't done anything at all. And in fact, that's how melody is taught in the UK in grade theory exams. You set a piece of poetry to music. It's always in 4 bars or 8 bars or 16 bars, and you kind of do it by rote. But of course, most successful melodies aren't necessarily built like that in terms of a formula. And so we need to judge the initial idea first to see where it leads. And there are so many different possibilities, which is why whenever you get people who say, you know, how to make the best tunes possible, if it was the best tune possible, it would be known by lots and lots of people. And they're not. And of course, I suppose if you hear a song or a tune in a film, it's more likely to impact you because it's in the film. You know, that's why advertisers spend millions of pounds influencing you for 30 seconds. So think about how that works overall in a film. So when we're starting off, we have to judge the melody and how it works out. And I'm going to do a bit of an experiment here because I don't know, I haven't pre-composed this at all. I just chose some random notes here to see what the decision making is in terms of how this works, and to try and not necessarily get a golden section moment or anything like that, but I want to make sure that structurally it works. What's interesting about this piece, because it's jazz essentially, doesn't have the sort of constraints of Beethoven or Brahms or anything like that, but it's still a self-contained tune. And for that reason, it's an interesting idea because it expands our understanding of how these melodies work. And, you know, there are lots of possibilities. So let's have a look at this and see what we can come up with. So, in other words, there are infinite possibilities here. And it might be worth sometimes to copy this. So I'm going to put it over here, actually. Just so we can kind of, you know, collect material. So I'm just inventing at the piano. And sometimes when you're writing, so I'm going to have a long bit of am I doing that or not? Let's see. Sometimes it's quite difficult to. Yes, this is right. So as soon as I do that, it then leads to other choices. Now you'll notice I'm not putting it here yet, because like a chess game, I want to see what the possibilities are. I could even do, or I could even do that. I quite like that. So here, what I'm doing, there's quite a lot of sort of progressive movement here because of the upward leap, but then there's also quite a bit of recessive movement to counterbalance it, which then has another balance of this. and another counterbalance with rest. Is it the best melody in the world? No, it's not yet. And it might never be. So that's one possibility. So that's another possibility. And I could work at that idea, that continuation. So now I've got different judgments to make. Should I tie this? Let's see. So I'm judging whether to do that or do something else. Yeah, so interesting enough, if I do that, it emphasises that note more. But if I do this, it almost gives that too much emphasis when I really want that to be the emphasis. Because as we can sort of clearly see, there's a sort of, again, moment of progression, another strong moment of progression, but now there's more recessive devices because of that wide interval leap. Like that, and falling tends to be recessionary. And by the way, all I started with was this. And we have a completely different sort of melody at this point. There are also other possibilities for this as well. So I'm going to start those. And this is what makes this fun, but also impossible at the same time, is that melody work is hard, doesn't come easily. And anybody who tells you otherwise hasn't really worked hard, maybe, at them. So I'm going to stick with that idea. Maybe it should just do that. I could make it into a classical melody. Oh, I could even do that. Actually, if I do that, I'm kind of using that, but now I'm developing it. And actually that needs a long recession, because it's quite strongly recessional. So now I could use the same idea. Yeah, I quite like. So once we get to this bit, it's difficult to know how to make it go because there are so many possibilities. And of course, what I want to demonstrate is that the further you go, the more possibilities there are, and you have to sort of explore them, but also then restrain yourself from going too far away from the original idea. So I quite like that because it's got a little bit of variety. Yeah, and then we could So it suggests a more of a B section at that point. No idea what sort of melody this would be appropriate for. So it seems so I'm not sticking to range particularly or anything like that. I'm just doing what feels natural. Whoops. Yeah, why did I do that? Don't know. So the ending is more complicated. But basically it's got a shape here. So let's just recap. Oops. Edit mode. It's quite bold. Sort of more searching. But it's still recessionary. And I think I need more recession. Something like that. So it has a balance. Let's just make that a bit smaller. Something like that would be an interesting approach to that specific idea. But notice that we went through that first in a completely different way. And that might lead to a completely different melody. Might do that. Maybe not that at the end. You know, something like that. I did it my way at the end. So then I'm also thinking kind of in terms of harmony in my head as well. Just in terms of sketching, then obviously I'll change it. So lots of different ways in which that can be harmonised, which is good because you want to have variety, especially if it's going to be reused. all sorts of different things. But I think the purpose of just this sort of quite short exercise is to see what are the possibilities. And the fact is that, you know, I haven't used a method as such, apart from what are the counterbalances, what are the structural places that I need for something to hold together. So here, the main motivic idea is here, and there's enough variety and a little bit of sort of, you know, continuity with stuff that we've had before. There's also this little twiddly bits as well. And also I found that at this point seemed to be a high point of the phrase. So let's think about this. How many bars is it that we got? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, kind of 18. 17 bars. Doesn't have to be regular. I'm not trying to write a song. I'm just trying to write a melody. I'm not trying to fit it into anything. And I'm trying to see where the music leads. But I'm also trying to put counterbalances on things so I don't go completely AWOL and it just ends up being a complete improvisation. I'm also trying to avoid sort of, you know, too much of a sine wave. But it's more undulating. And also really that's the high point at that point as well. So let's see whether it accords to any sort of golden section idea, you know, just in terms of bars. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So I'm going to go 17. I'm just interested. I don't care whether it is or not. And then I'm going to divide this and see where it should be. So 17 times 0.618, which is roughly the golden section, should be about 10 and a half beats. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and a half. Bang in the middle of that. That literally is the GS point. And I'm interested because that was a natural feeling that I got. It wasn't worked out or preconditioned at all. But it's around that point. And also it might mean that that's actually quite an interesting idea as well. There's something rather nicely appealing about those melodic intervals as well. And that might lead to a completely different idea. This sort of idea. So I'm trying to just free myself really from the sort of the bitter constraints of theory. But also I'm trying to take on board the fact that melodies can't be composed to formulae. They might result in some sort of formula, and we can analyse melodies all the time, but really, for me, the best way is to sort of see how much progression is there, how much recession is there, and are you balancing them? And does the melody deal with specifics? So he says it's more important to deal with the specifics, and that means exploring a variety of melodic ideas, which we kind of have done from this opening, and their most prominent features, in order to decide how the structural implications of those features can best be fulfilled. So a characteristic opening figure will generally be sufficient to start working out the possibilities for musical action that will determine the overall form. And it says it might be 16 bars, but on the other hand, it might not. Everything depends upon the nature of the ideas. And it's interesting because I was also reading that, Bach often changed his ideas about phrase lengths. And of course, in the Baroque era, those sort of regular phrases weren't a thing at all. That was only in the classical era that they kind of were. So this Sweet William was another one. I won't write down the melody, but I'll just play it for you. So really nice sort of Mixolydian idea. Solemn, hesitant, characterized by a tendency to draw back from such peaks as there are. Falling melodic lines are easier to sing than rising ones, which is interesting and are often evident in children's songs. But their effect is also strongly recessive. Not quite sure I agree with falling melodic lines. Not necessarily agree with him on that one. But it is a really interesting little ditty, that folk song. Again, it's not necessarily the most memorable one, and I think this is where the skill of people like John Williams and John Powell and others really lies, upon their ability to create something which they work really hard at. I think those sort of melodies don't become unbidden into the world. I think you have to really work hard at them. If I wanted to make this a bit more concise, I'd have to rework it. I might go straight there. Yeah, you see, after that, it has a sort of balance. So I'm not sure even that would work. So I'd have to start again. Whoops. But then it's not particularly melodic in terms of singability. That might work. Something like that. But sometimes a harmony can often sort of, change things around. That it might do something like that instead. And also it's usually instrumental, and instrumental melodies tend to have a bit more arpeggiaic balance as well, unlike a song in terms of a lyrical song, in other words, something set to lyrics. So I hope that's been useful as a sort of little experiment to see how you go about writing the melodies. I'd be really interested to see if you've posted something, trying to find a way of sending it to me would be really interesting. Just in terms of if you started off with this, where did it go afterwards? It's an interesting exercise in how people go about approaching things. So I hope you found that useful. Sadly, there are no answers in terms of creating a brilliant, memorable thing. They all have different characteristics. This is a completely different characteristic for most other melodies that we've perhaps come across. So it's sort of, contained, but it's very clever. And also it's got that little head as well, with a little bit of variety, and it's got recognisable features as well. So I've tried to do something similar. It's not as memorable as Gershwin. I'm not as good a composer as Gershwin, of course not. But it's got that, and it's got that. So I've used that here, which is the same as that. It's using that. And then this is expanded. Then it sets out a completely different kind of climactic point, which is okay. We could work at that. You know, it could be that. Maybe that. I quite like that. So again, the receding bit after the climactic point is using that. And in fact, only that bit, because we don't need that at the end. Although we could have that. Like that, but I just think it's too much. I think after having that bit, it makes more sense to have the longer notes. And also, it's rather dominant orientated. So we got that note. Goes up there. So it has a sort of structural, you can see where the structure is. It's a bit like the fanfare I was talking about with the Copeland fanfare of the common man, where you can see him working out what he needs to do. There's an interesting idea. Anyway, I hope you found that useful. Hopefully I'll get my voice back one day. Be nice. And I'll see you soon.